Chinese EVs just cracked open the Canadian market. 49,000 units a year, tariffs slashed to 6.1%, and 3 major brands already setting up dealerships. But the real threat to every automaker in North America is not the cars themselves. It's a pricing weapon most people have not even noticed yet. And the one barrier that could kill this entire experiment has nothing to do with winter. Canada shares the longest undefended border with the country that banned Chinese EVs entirely. It has winters that break battery chemistry, a federal rebate program, the EEVAP, that explicitly excludes Chinese-built vehicles, and a prime minister who opened the door to Chinese imports anyway. That combination does not exist anywhere else. Not in Europe, not in Southeast Asia, not in Australia. Canada is the only market where a Chinese EV has to prove itself against cold, against policy exclusion, against an insurance system with no data on it, and against a neighbor to the south watching every move. If these cars survive here, something fundamental shifts. But what does survive actually mean? Not just thermodynamics, reputation. And reputation in this market gets decided in the first winter. The first company through that door is BYD, and the vehicle at the center of the conversation is the BYD Seal, a mid-size electric sedan, roughly the footprint of a Tesla Model 3, built on cell-to-body architecture where the blade battery is the vehicle structure itself. More rigidity, lower production cost, a design choice that works as engineering on a spec sheet and as a pricing weapon on a dealer lot. Reports indicate BYD is pursuing around 20 dealerships across Canada within the first year, starting in the GTA and expanding to Vancouver, Montreal, and Calgary. The Seal's pitch for Canadian buyers is direct. Comparable range, a heavily equipped interior, and a price point that could sit well below a similarly spec'd Model 3, even without qualifying for the federal rebate. But here is where it gets complicated. BYD's DC fast charging speeds have generally trailed the segment leaders in independent testing. In mild weather, that gap is manageable. In cold weather, it widens. Why? Because battery preconditioning, the process of warming the cells to an optimal temperature before accepting a fast charge, draws energy and takes time. On a -20 morning after the car has soaked overnight in an unheated driveway, that first highway charging stop may deliver considerably less power than the rated maximum. BYD equips the Seal with a heat pump that recycles waste energy from the battery and powertrain to warm the cabin, which is more efficient than resistive heating. But heat pumps have a physical limitation. Their efficiency degrades as ambient temperature drops. Industry data suggests that below roughly -10 Celsius, supplemental resistive heaters engage, and the range preservation advantage narrows. Does that make the Seal a bad winter car? Not necessarily. Meanwhile, BYD's executive vice president told Bloomberg the company is open to acquiring legacy manufacturing facilities, and the word Canada was in that conversation. What does that signal to automakers with idle plants across Ontario? But say the range works. Say the charging is tolerable. There is still a number most buyers do not check until after they have fallen in love with the car, the insurance quote. And that number, for Chinese EVs entering Canada, may change the math entirely. The insurance question hits hardest when the brand behind the vehicle has no history in the country. That brings the story to Chery, China's largest automaker by export volume, and specifically to the Omoda E5, a compact electric crossover with a 61 kilowatt-hour battery and roughly 200 horsepower. Chery has been filing trademarks in Canada for multiple sub-brands: Omoda, JQ, Exeed, Luxeed. The company is reportedly hiring Canadian auto industry professionals and planning a Toronto area office. Its global sales target for this year is 3.2 million units, a record. But volume abroad does not translate to trust at home, and here is the specific problem. Canadian insurers use a system called Clear to classify vehicles for risk pricing. Clear needs domestic claims data. When that data does not exist, insurers map the vehicle to something comparable, same weight class, same powertrain, same price bracket, and then add what amounts to an uncertainty surcharge. One industry study estimated that Chinese EVs could initially cost somewhere in the range of 20 to 30% more to insure than comparable EVs already established in Canada. If that estimate holds, the cheapest insurance scenario, according to the projection, would be a subcompact in Atlantic Canada, somewhere around $1,800 annually. The most expensive? A vehicle like the Omoda E5 in Alberta, potentially approaching $5,000. That is not a rounding error. That is a second car payment. Now, does that mean the Omoda E5 is doomed? Not if the repairability pipeline develops quickly. Sherry has been working with Thatcham Research in the UK to embed repair standard compliance into vehicle design from the factory. A proactive approach that, if extended to Canada, could shorten the timeline for insurers to lower that surcharge. But if extended is doing a lot of work in that sentence. So the buyer weighing the Omoda E5 faces a question that the sticker price alone does not answer. What is the total annual cost, and how long until the insurance market catches up to the purchase price? Which leads to the assumption almost everyone makes and almost everyone gets partially wrong. The common belief is that winter is the wall. Cold kills range, cold slows charging, cold exposes every weakness, and that is true. But is it more true for Chinese EVs than for anyone else? The Norway L-Prix is an annual winter range test that puts EVs through real-world cold weather driving. In the 2026 edition, Chinese-made vehicles reportedly occupied the majority of the top 10 finishing positions. That does not mean every Chinese EV handles cold well. The variation between brands is enormous. But it means the blanket assumption that Chinese engineering cannot handle northern climates is, at minimum, outdated. And the brand that might benefit most from that shift in perception is one that already has infrastructure in Canada, just not under its own name. Geely operates here through Volvo and Polestar. But the nameplate it trademarked last year, Zeekr, is different. It is the first Chinese-developed brand from the Geely family targeting Canada directly, not through a Swedish intermediary. Zeekr's vehicles are built in one of the most automated factories on the planet, and its global lineup includes premium electric SUVs with strong charging speeds and extensive standard equipment. The advantage for Canada is structural. Geely's existing dealer network, parts supply agreements, and service relationships through Volvo could give Zeekr a faster path to operational credibility than any standalone Chinese entrant. That matters because, as the insurance and repair conversation keeps showing, credibility is not about the car. It is about the ecosystem around the car. The disadvantage is equally structural. Zeekr is positioned as a premium brand, higher prices, and the trade deal was sold to Canadians partly on the promise of affordability. The government stated it, anticipated that within 5 years, more than 50% of the imported vehicles would be priced below 35,000 Canadian dollars at the border. But the published regulations reveal a graduated ramp. 0% affordability requirement in year 1, 10% in year 2, rising to 50% only by 2030. So, if Zeekr fills quota slots with premium vehicles in the early years, it is technically compliant, but it contradicts the narrative that opened the door. Who does that benefit? The automaker capturing margin, or the buyer who was told cheaper cars were coming? And for US watchers, a different question. Geely's CEO told Bloomberg the company is considering localized production across multiple regions. If Zeekr builds in Canada rather than just importing, does that make it a Canadian car? Does it qualify for the rebate? Does it cross the border differently? Those answers do not exist yet, and the absence of answers is itself a form of market power. Then there is the path that sidesteps the import debate entirely, or tries to. Stellantis, the conglomerate behind Jeep, Chrysler, Dodge, and Ram, holds a significant stake in Leapmotor through a joint venture called Leapmotor International. Reports from Bloomberg and multiple outlets this week confirmed that Stellantis is in early-stage discussions to assemble Leapmotor vehicles at its currently idle plant in Ontario, the same facility that was promised a Jeep production line before that commitment fell apart in late 2025. The vehicle in question is the Leapmotor C10, a mid-size electric crossover with a 69.9 kilowatt-hour LFP battery, roughly 260 miles of range under European test cycles, and a 5-star Euro NCAP safety rating. In global markets, it undercuts the Tesla Model Y by a wide margin. Stellantis backing means something no other Chinese entrant can offer on day one. An existing North American dealer network and an established parts and service infrastructure. That is a genuine competitive moat. But what does assembly actually look like here? The reported proposal involves knockdown kits, pre-manufactured components shipped from China and assembled locally with limited domestic supply chain integration. Is that manufacturing? Technically. Is it the kind of investment that creates deep industrial roots and long-term jobs? That is where the debate ignites. Critics see tariff arbitrage dressed up as localization. Supporters see a first step that could deepen over time. The same trajectory China itself followed decades ago when it invited foreign automakers to build locally. In winter terms, the C10 faces a specific technical constraint. Its DC fast charging speed is reported at around 84 kilowatts maximum, substantially slower than vehicles built on 800-volt architectures. On a cold afternoon at a highway charging station, that translates into noticeably longer stops, time that accumulates over a cross-province drive. And there is a geopolitical ceiling that no amount of engineering solves. Washington has signaled clearly that it will not tolerate Chinese vehicles reaching the U.S. market through Canada. Any Leapmotor assembled in Ontario would almost certainly face prohibitive American tariffs if it crossed the border, which means the entire production case depends on Canadian domestic volume. Is that enough to keep a plant running? The quota is 49,000 vehicles in year one, rising to 70,000 over 5 years. That is under 3% of the Canadian auto market, even at the ceiling. No Chinese brand is going to outsell the established leaders here in the near term. So what is actually at stake? Not volume. Price, gravity. When a crossover with comparable specs and features appears on a lot for $32,000, every competitor listed at $45,000 has to justify the gap or close it. Dealers renegotiate with manufacturers, optional features become standard, warranty terms extend, and the vehicle forcing that recalibration does not need to sell in large numbers. It just needs to sit there, visible, with a price tag that asks a question the buyer was not asking before. The fifth vehicle in this conversation is not yet available in Canada, and that is precisely why it belongs here. The Xpeng G6 is a mid-size electric SUV built on an 800-volt architecture with reported peak charging speeds exceeding 400 kilowatts, which would translate to a 10 to 80% charge in roughly 12 minutes under favorable conditions. Xpeng declined to comment when asked about Canadian plans. But the G6 is already on sale in Europe and Australia with a starting price in those markets around the equivalent of $35,000 US. What makes it relevant to the Canadian conversation is not availability, it is the technology benchmark it sets. That 800-volt system does not just charge faster in good weather, it handles cold weather battery preconditioning more efficiently, bringing cells to optimal temperature in less time and with less energy drain. In the 2026 Norway winter test, an Xpeng model reportedly consumed significantly less energy in cold conditions than the Tesla it was tested alongside. If those results hold under scrutiny, they challenge a core piece of the North American EV narrative. That Western and Korean brands own the technological edge. The weakness is everything that surrounds the car itself. No Canadian dealer network, no parts pipeline, no service agreements, no claims data for insurers. It is a watchlist vehicle, the kind of car that appears in forum threads and comparison spreadsheets long before it appears on a lot. But watchlist vehicles shape expectations. And when a buyer walks into a dealership knowing that a Chinese crossover exists that charges in 12 minutes while the one in front of them charges in 35, the salesperson has a different conversation to navigate. For US automakers, the Xpeng G6 makes a specific gap visible. When the difference in charging speed between a Chinese and an American vehicle is that wide, the explanation is no longer subsidies or cheap labor. It is engineering velocity, the pace at which a company iterates on core technology. And that kind of gap does not close with tariffs. The buyer who saves $10,000 on a purchase but pays $3,000 more in insurance. The dealer who doubles foot traffic but risks the domestic franchise. The charging operator whose stations were not built for ultra-fast speeds. The US policy watcher who lobbies for border controls while domestic automakers quietly study BYD's vertical integration. The neighbor who just wants a reliable winter commute and does not care where the car was made. That neighbor may be the most rational actor in the room, and that rationality is what tariffs alone cannot stop. What taking over means here is not domination. It is the moment a price tag forces every competitor, insurer, policymaker, and parts supplier to react. 49,000 vehicles is a small number. The questions they force are not. Drop a comment. Should Canada cap the quota tighter or expand it faster? And what would flip your position? There is more to this story, and what comes next might reframe everything. Subscribe so it finds you.